does she hold the key? The FBI interviews the girlfriend of the Las Vegas shooter in the search for a motive for the massacre. Also tonight, the president comforts the wounded and praises first responders.
Go that way!
A grateful nation thanks you.
The Secretary of State on reports he called the president a moron.
The places I come from, we don't deal with that kind of petty nonsense.
And modest heroes.
Tears of joy, of pride of our team and our community, and tears of sadness.
This is the CBS Evening News. Reporting tonight from Las Vegas, here is Anthony Mason.
Good evening. We're on the 38th floor of the Mandalay Bay Resort and Casino, overlooking the scene of the Sunday night massacre. This is the view Stephen Paddock had when he opened fire on more than 20,000 people at a country music concert. When it was over, 58 were dead. From here, you can see the festival grounds still littered with the debris and belongings of victims and those who fled the scene in panic. You can also look right into the sniper's nest, where, throughout the day, federal investigators could be seen taking measurements in the window from which the gunman opened fire, room 135 on the 32nd floor. The president flew by this building today as he came here to comfort victims and meet with first responders. And FBI agents interviewed Paddock's girlfriend today as they search for a motive for the attack. John Blackstone begins our coverage.
This afternoon, Mary Lou Danley was questioned at the FBI's Los Angeles field office. Danley returned voluntarily last night after visiting her native Philippines, taken from the gate in Los Angeles in a wheelchair and met by federal agents. Authorities say she is key in helping to piece together what motivated Paddock. In an interview with Australian TV, Danley's sisters, whose identities were withheld, said Paddock himself had sent her out of the country before he carried out his massacre.
Because Steve is not here to talk anymore. Only Mary Lou can maybe help.
Investigators are also going through Paddock's two homes and crime scene evidence from the hotel suite. They recovered a total of 47 firearms overall, 24 of them from his hotel room, some seen here in these pictures. Jill Snyder of the ATF told CBS's Nora O'Donnell that Paddock had been stockpiling weapons for years.
How many firearms were purchased in the last year?
He purchased 33 firearms, majority of them rifles.
That didn't set off a red flag anywhere in the ATF?
We wouldn't get notified of the purchases of the rifles. We would only get notified if there was a multiple sale, which would be 2 or more handguns in an individual purchase.
Police body cam footage from the moments during the attack show the firepower the officers faced and how they tried to help civilians.
Get out of here! There's gunshots coming from over there!
The gunfire continued for more than 9 minutes. SWAT police stormed Paddock's suite on the Mandalay Bay's 32nd floor.
Breach.
About an hour after the shooting, and found Paddock dead of an apparent gunshot wound. Paddock was a regular at the gun shop near his home in Mesquite, Nevada. He bought 5 guns here.
This is a bolt-action rifle.
Including a bolt-action rifle 3 days before the shooting, says General Manager Christopher Sullivan.
Over coffee, I was having a moment in myself thinking that I may have very well been the last person to shake hands with that man.
Mary Lou Danley's attorney said late this afternoon she had no idea he was planning the rampage. The thousands of dollars he wired to her in the Philippines, she said, was meant for her to buy a home there. Danley thought Paddock was planning on breaking up with her. Anthony?
John Blackstone, thanks. Justice and Homeland Security correspondent Jeff Pegues continues to work his law enforcement sources and has more now on the investigation.
FBI agents could be seen today sifting through the hotel suite Stephen Paddock used to rain down bullets on the concert crowd.
Go that way! Get out of here! There's gunshots coming from over there!
Law enforcement is still searching for a motive. FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe spoke to CNBC.
We don't have any immediately accessible thumbprints that would indicate
the shooter's ideology or motivation or really what compelled him to get there.
In the last 36 hours, FBI labs began processing electronic devices like cell phones and computers recovered during searches of his properties.
I think it's the quieter and harder work that we have to do now in terms of identifying people who may have known him, who may have seen him, who crossed paths with him in the days and weeks leading up to the event, and that's really where we're focused right now.
Investigators are also focusing on Paddock's mental health and whether something happened in October of 2016 that pushed him to stockpile most of the 47 guns and rifles in his arsenal. Also of interest, whether Paddock was considering targeting another large concert that took place in Las Vegas a week before the Country Music Festival.
Hey, they're shooting right at us, guys. Everybody stay down.
Manny Gomez is a former FBI agent.
This person was looking for the best target opportunity, and it didn't matter what crowd he was going to fire into. He was looking for the largest impact for this attack.
Investigators say Paddock spent a lot of his time gambling in the days before the attack, and more than a dozen currency transaction reports filed with the U.S. Treasury Department back that up. Anthony.
Jeff Pegues, thanks, Jeff. We are back now at street level, as you can see, across from the festival grounds where the shooting occurred, and police are just about to open up this street finally, 3 days after the shooting. Nearly 50 people are still in critical condition tonight. The president met today with some of the injured and the doctors and nurses who saved their lives. Here's Chief White House correspondent Major Garrett.
President Trump landed in the shadow of the Mandalay Bay Hotel and then drove near the scene of the massacre. In the center of a grieving city he came to console.
It makes you very proud to be an American when you see the job that they've done.
At University Medical Center, the hospital that received 100 victims, the president thanked doctors and nurses. The president also toured the Las Vegas Police Command Center and hailed the bravery of officers and civilians who faced the terror head on.
In the depths of horror, we will always find hope in the men and women who risk their lives for ours.
On behalf of the nation, the president offered a promise.
We know that your sorrow feels endless. We stand together to help you carry your pain. You're not alone. We will never leave your side.
And he reflected on how America endures.
In the darkest moments, what shines most brightly is the goodness that thrives in the hearts of our people.
And of the shooter, the president said his wires were screwed up.
He's a sick, demented man.
The president left as he arrived, with the crime scene never far away. Near the end of his remarks, the president said the nation will wrestle with the Las Vegas tragedy for some time. There is no sign that reckoning will include any reassessment of the president's opposition to new gun control laws. Anthony?
Major Garrett, thanks, Major. There was no shortage of heroes Sunday night at Sunrise Hospital. It's the closest trauma center to the Las Vegas Strip and got the most patients. As the injured streamed in, so did 100 doctors and 100 nurses. Today, some shared their memories of that awful night.
We have multiple casualties. GSW is in the medical tent. Multiple casualties. We can't worry about victims. We need to stop the shooter before we have more victims. We got one shot in the head.
Ambulances were just coming from everywhere. There were pickup trucks with patients just cutting in front of me and just trying to come right to the emergency room.
Sunrise Hospital and Medical Center's Administrative Director of Emergency Services, Dorita Sonderecker, ER Dr. Jason Katz, and Medical Director Scott Scher were in the middle of the chaos as the wounded flooded in.
There was blood everywhere, and there were, honestly, I want to say bodies on stretchers everywhere.
Oh my God.
The patients kept rolling in, and we're just trying to find placement for everybody.
Scott, what did you see?
All penetrating wounds. I mean, whether it was shrapnel or whether it was direct hits, the sickest patients were the ones that had direct hits to the torso or the abdomen and gunshot wounds to the head.
As all these patients are coming in, are you in your head wondering what's happened?
None of us really truly knew what happened. We didn't know how many people were shot. We didn't know how many assailants and things like that.
You don't have the time. You don't have time to ask those questions.
No.
Did you have places to put everybody?
So all of a sudden, I have an influx of over 200 patients. when we were already busy, was a challenge. And I think the most important thing that I felt and saw that night was a calmness throughout the chaos. We knew we just had to remain calm, take care of the patients, triage, and keep going. And honestly, it was at some point it became just space. If there was a hallway space, a patient went there. If there was an empty chair, a patient went there.
I'm sure you've seen a lot in a hospital. What surprised you, good or bad, about what you saw?
No matter how many patients we had 214 patients that night. And the communication you would think would be broken, but the communication was so impressive.
One thing surprised me is, seeing a lot of these people that were shot and things and families, is how well they handle it. And that to me is amazing.
The patients actually said, he's hurt more than I am. I'm going to go back here and let them have my bed.
You see this from a completely different side than most people. What do you take away from this?
How horrific this was and the evil that's out there. And number two, the sense of humanity that was shared with our community, with the caregivers that, came in to help. And last night, when I got home, I had tears. I had tears of joy, of pride of our team and our community, and tears of sadness.
They did an extraordinary job at sunrise on Sunday night and Monday morning, and all the families I have spoken with are profoundly grateful. Rex Tillerson made an extraordinary appearance before cameras at the State Department today to refute reports that he had disparaged the president and had to be talked out of quitting. Margaret Brennan has that story.
He loves his country. He puts Americans and America first. He's smart.
The press-averse Secretary of State declared that he never considered quitting his job, but did not deny having referred to the president as a moron.
We don't deal with that kind of petty nonsense, and it is intended to do nothing but divide people. And I'm just not going to be part of this effort to divide this administration.
The State Department spokesperson later denied it.
The Secretary did not use that type of language to speak about the President of the United States.
The president was told Tillerson made the remark after this July meeting at the Pentagon. Days earlier, the president had blown up at Tillerson over sharply differing views on the Iran nuclear deal. Tillerson himself was frustrated. He'd been undermined on other key issues, including Venezuela and a Mideast dispute. It also became personal. Tillerson, a lifelong Boy Scout, was dismayed by Mr. Trump's comments at a Boy Scout gathering.
Who the hell wants to speak about politics when I'm in front of the Boy Scouts? Right?
The president has been personally frustrated by Tillerson's reluctance to defend his equivocation on Charlottesville.
I think there's blame on both sides.
The president speaks for himself.
But the two men spoke by phone today, and Tillerson's spokesperson said they're all good. And despite the president's tweet this weekend telling the Secretary of State to stop wasting his time by trying to start talks with North Korea, he said today that he has total confidence in him.
Yeah, I'm very honored by his comments.
Senator Bob Corker, who is chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, said today that while some in the administration are trying to undermine Tillerson's authority, it's Tillerson, along with Defense Secretary Jim Mattis and Chief of Staff John Kelly, who are helping to separate the country from chaos. Anthony?
Margaret Brennan. Thank you, Margaret. And still ahead on the CBS Evening News from Las Vegas, a call to ban the device that made an arsenal much more deadly. In the wake of the massacre here, Democratic Senator Dianne Feinstein of California is proposing a nationwide ban on devices that turn rifles into rapid-fire machine guns. She's long supported gun control measures with little success. Here's Don Daler.
Stephen Paddock was able to pour hundreds of rounds into the crowd below because of these devices, bump-fire stocks, which are legal, but which Senator Dianne Feinstein wants to ban.
You have to stand up. You have to say enough is enough.
With some Republicans open to a hearing, it may have a chance. But recent efforts after mass shootings like in Las Vegas have met fierce opposition. Back in 2013, after 20 children and 7 adults were massacred by a person with a semi-automatic rifle, Senator Feinstein proposed a law against those weapons. Congress voted it down. In fact, despite an average of one mass shooting of 4 or more people each day since Sandy Hook, there's been no major shift in the nation's gun laws. Daniel Webster is director of Johns Hopkins University's Center for Gun Policy and Research. People say maybe this will be the one that affects change, and yet it doesn't. Why?
I think the gun lobby has been very effective in promoting the overall idea that any regulation is a violation of the Second Amendment.
New Jersey shooting range owner Ross Asias is against any restrictions.
It's not the device, it's the people. And unfortunately, you can't fix crazy until it happens.
Even though a recent Pew poll shows 68% of Americans favor an assault weapons ban, a Republican-controlled Congress makes that type of ban unlikely. According to the Center for Responsive Politics, last year Republicans received over $54 million in advertising and donations from the NRA. Democrats, $265. In advertising alone, organizations that oppose any new gun legislation are outspending gun control proponents 10-1. As for those bump fire stocks that Congress may ban, retailers are selling out of them. Anthony.
Don Daler. And coming up 2 weeks after the storm in Puerto Rico, the death toll more than doubles. The White House budget director said today there will be no bailout for Puerto Rico after the president suggested there might be. The hurricane death toll, meanwhile, more than doubled overnight. Here's Dr. John LaPook.
There is misery all over this island.
For 2 weeks, resident Nick Prouty has been flying almost daily runs to pick up the sick and drop off supplies.
The roads seem impassable up here.
Even now, it's hard to measure the staggering toll of the hurricane.
Where do these people go? There's absolutely nothing left. These houses are absolutely destroyed. They're in splinters.
Many of the new deaths are from the island's rural interior, where most people are still without water, without power, and aid is arriving very slowly. Estimates are it will take months to restore electricity.
Flashlights, you don't need them anymore. You don't need them anymore.
That's at odds with the president's upbeat remark about power to a selected crowd in a church. Further inland, we landed near a community hospital in Utuado.
Do the respirators work?
With dwindling supplies, Dr. Jose Villafañe is struggling to get help for his sickest patients.
As we stabilize them and try to transfer them to another hospital, they are dying in the other settings.
So they end up dying either on the way to the hospital elsewhere or in San Juan?
That's it, Drew.
There are people who we haven't recovered yet that are dead in their houses.
As Prouty looks down, he knows there's more suffering than he can see.
We don't see it because we can't get to those people. No one's gone out to them yet. Finding out who's in there, who's missing, it has to happen on a door-to-door basis.
Today, Puerto Rico's governor told me the rising toll includes drownings that had not been reported. 3 deaths were from loss of oxygen when the power went off. Anthony?
Dr. John LaPook, just back from Puerto Rico. Thanks. And up next, a father and daughter saving lives together in Las Vegas.
This portion of the CBS Evening News is sponsored by Taltz.
We end tonight with 2 people who've made careers out of saving lives and found themselves Sunday night at the center of a killing field. Here's Carter Evans.
It was absolutely the worst feeling. My gut just dropped.
Firefighter Ben Cole knew his daughter was in the crowd.
There were 22,000 people there.
I was looking for one.
He was off duty, enjoying the concert. 20-year-old Rachel was working there as an EMT. Her dad ran through the chaos and found her.
We embraced, shed a few tears. She said, there's people need help. I said, okay, and we said, let's get to work. I said, you're on my hip, let's go.
The father-daughter paramedic team immediately treated everyone they could.
People were screaming, there were some headshots over there, and unfortunately there's not much you can do for that. It's horrible for me, 100 times worse for them.
There was a woman laying on the floor, and there was a man crouched by her. And I asked if they needed medical attention, and he just waved me off. the fact that he could be so selfless and know that there are others in need as well.
What they endured that night is only now sinking in.
When you close your eyes at night and you see all the lights and all the people, that's something you can't run from.
What's it like to see him shaken to the core?
I don't see him shaken to the core. I see him when everything was in chaos, pulling it together, giving instructions, not breaking down.
I'm glad my daughter says it didn't strike the core to my core. It did. This hit me hard.
They're now both seeking help.
Our counselor said, if you let this fear change your life, then he's taking another victim.
You're not going to let him win?
No, not at all.
Carter Evans, CBS News, Las Vegas.
This was today's headline here, Valor in Vegas. There's been so much of it here these past few days. That's the CBS Evening News. I'm Anthony Mason in Las Vegas. Thank you for watching. Good night.